What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Lifting Jelly. It's been such a long time since I've done a video. I wanted to start off with what's been going on. Anybody who knows me on a personal level or on social media knows that I recently recovered from having brain surgery. So things took quite the 180 last year. I've been dealing with a lot of weird symptoms when I was in the gym and training, and it got to a point where I just kind of knew something was off. These were symptoms that were not related to anything that I've ever dealt with, and I really just had to push and fight just to get testing done. I ended up switching doctors, and long story short, I figured out what happened to me. So let's rewind, let's back up. Let's start from the beginning. So last year, 2021, was when I started to notice just a stream of random symptoms and things that were occurring to me, which I thought were related to either anxiety or overtraining. It started off with just headaches. I would get a lot of headaches. They built up over the past couple years, but more recently in 2021, and it got to the point where the headaches felt like straight pressure. So I would wake up and I would just feel immense pressure as soon as I stood up and got ready to start my day, and it literally felt like there was no more room in my skull, like my brain was pushing against my head. But I also had issues where turning my head certain ways or going down and up, it would create that pressurized feeling. So that was pretty unusual. I would do things like more recovery, more mobility work. I would try to sleep more. So I let my doctor know, and she recommended doing essential oils to help, which at first I was like, okay, I get it. I appreciate that she respects my holistic side of things. As you guys know, after that, I ended up getting rhabdo after doing the workout called Awful Annie. It ended up being rhabdo to the point where I was hospitalized for 2 days before I could go home. Then the issue I had with my knee started hurting. It would lock up. I could no longer squat to depth. Ended up fighting my doctor again just to get imaging done. And at first she refused. She finally ordered an MRI. It ended up being a partial meniscus tear, and basically she just kind of left it at that. I feel like there was no follow-up. There was no immediate cause of concern. So I ended up filing a claim against my doctor because of all these misdiagnoses and just the lack of follow-through on her end. Thank God for my significant other at the time and his mom, because they helped me switch over my medical care over to a way better place. And I ended up getting a new primary doctor. I ended up getting someone who was concerned for me. He understood that I was an athlete. He understood that I was an Olympic weightlifter. He referred me over to an orthopedic surgeon, pointed out the tear, said there were a couple ways of handling it. The main solution was surgery. So I decided to opt for surgery. Got the knee surgery, whatever, that's fine. So between a 6-month period of getting rhabdo, I ended up having to get knee surgery. And after knee surgery was when I started to notice some really strange issues related to my CrossFit workouts. The very first CrossFit workout, post knee op, it was something kind of intense. It was a lot of calories on the bike. It was dumbbell step-ups and I think sit-ups or something like that. So I was completely fine. It was a good workout. It was what I needed to kind of bounce back into the sport. And then I was totally fine, went home, ate dinner, and I was just chilling on my bed watching something on Netflix. And then I started to notice out of the corner of my eye what's referred to as kaleidoscope vision. So it's basically out of both corners of my eyes. It was as if I had the kaleidoscope things, and it was happening in the corners of my vision. I was like, this is weird, it's not settling. I don't know where it's coming from. The feeling started to intensify. I began panicking a little bit, had elevated heart rate along with the kaleidoscope vision, and then I just felt awful the rest of the night. I was very paranoid. I started to cramp up or have stomach issues, and then I had a mild headache. I ended up going to the ER because I was like, what the heck is going on with my vision? And they're like, oh, it must have just been heat exhaustion. And I was like, that's weird because you guys did a pee test, you took blood, and you're saying I have heat exhaustion. But I'm hydrated, and I just recovered from rhabdo previously. I would know if I had some type of heat exhaustion. I just knew in my soul it was not heat exhaustion. I ended up getting discharged after a few hours, and then I just went back to regular training, and I was just keeping watch of any weird symptoms that came up. So I ended up kind of taking a break from CrossFit, focusing solely on weightlifting because weightlifting didn't really cause any adverse effects. Until one day I was done with work. I decided to stop at Target because I was super hungry. I didn't really eat that day. And then I started to notice while I was shopping, kaleidoscope vision happened again. And I started to panic. So I went to check out and I grabbed a soda because I was like, maybe this is low blood sugar. Grabbed a soda, left, drank the soda, and I just kind of sat there for a second, and the kaleidoscope vision didn't go away. And usually when I would get the kaleidoscope vision, like that first time, it would last maybe about 5 to 10 minutes and then it would disperse. This time it was not going away. So I started to panic. I checked my heart rate, elevated heart rate again. So I was like, oh my God, like I need to go to the ER. Something is seriously wrong. This is where it got crazy. I ended up driving to the ER. I remember driving myself, but I could not remember at the same time. I was not very coherent, and I thought it was maybe from panic, but it was like, no, like my brain is not functioning how it should be. Along with that, I started to get a really, really bad migraine. Driving up to the hospital, and like I hit a curb. I was kind of erratic at that point, very nervous. Walked into the ER. I had a lot of trouble filling out the paperwork, and that's when I was like, oh my God, like what is this? Like what is going on? I filled out the paperwork as best as I could, but my writing was really squiggly. So I'm in the waiting room, waiting to be seen. The headache intensifies, the migraine gets really bad, and then out of nowhere, literally the whole right side of my body goes numb. Like if you cut me in half, the whole right side was numb. And by that point I was like, oh shit, like am I having a stroke for real? Is this a mini stroke? Like I don't know what's going on. I didn't feel my face drooping or anything, but the best way I can describe it was it felt like a stroke. I just kind of sat there because I'm like, what else can I do? I'm in the waiting room, there's hella people here. I just have to wait to be seen. After about like 3 or 4 minutes, the numbness goes away, the feeling in my right side returns, and then the headache gets even worse. Like my shit is pounding. And to the point where like it was hard to keep my eyes open because it was bright. It was scary and it was very painful. One of the nurses was like, oh, these are called ocular migraines, like, but you're gonna be okay. Like I get these all the time. I just take a pill for it and then it's fine. And I mean, it was kind of calming, but not at the same time because I'm like, girl, I literally just had half my body go numb. This is not a dumbass migraine. This is something else. I see a doctor and this really pissed me off. So he's like, what's going on? I told him like I have a horrible, horrible migraine. Like half my body went numb. I had kaleidoscope vision, and I described all these symptoms to him, and he was like, oh, it sounds like you have a headache. We're gonna diagnose you with a headache. And he's like, oh, we can give you some stuff and then send you home. And I was like, I started crying because I'm like, no, this is not just a headache. Like I've had headaches. These are not headaches. This is not just a regular migraine. Something weird is going on. And he was like, oh, why are you crying? Why are you crying? I was like, because there's something wrong with me and you guys don't want to do any testing to figure out what's wrong. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, like there's nothing else we can do. Get back out to your bed or whatever, and then I'll have a nurse come in and give you what's called like a migraine cocktail and an IV and let you rest for a few hours. By that point, I felt so defeated. So they give me this migraine cocktail and they're like, how are you doing? And I was in tears. It was hard to keep my eyes open. And I had been there for like 5 hours. And then I had the IV in my arm. I felt really like none of my questions were answered of what was going on. They're like, yeah, we can check with the doctor and see if maybe he can order an MRI for you. And I was like, yes, please, like I need imaging. Something is wrong. So they asked the doctor if they can take me up to get an MRI. They come back, they're like, I'm so sorry, like the doctor said that you don't fit the criteria for getting an MRI. And he just really thinks it's a headache. And I was done. I was so pissed, and I was just so done with the day. Went home, went to bed. I woke up, the migraine was still there, so I called into work. And then I immediately called my doctor and I was like, hey, like, this is what happened. This is my second time going to the ER for this symptom, and I think there's something going on. And I told him the same symptoms. I had kaleidoscope vision. This time around, I had the numbness on my right side. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna refer you to a neurologist to see if we can like do some deep diving into what's going on. I see the neurologist. I explained to him my symptoms, and he's like, it does sound like it could be migraines. He's like, but let's get an MRI done because this is weird, like you've never had these symptoms prior to you coming in, so let's just get an MRI done just to be sure. And the majority of cases, there's nothing there, like we don't find anything, so I think you'll be all right. So I'm going into this very confidently, like, whew, okay, like I'll be all right, you know, it's probably migraines, like he said, I'll be diagnosed with migraines, whatever. So during this time, I had been training for American Open Series in New Mexico. I ended up flying to New Mexico, staying in there for the week. Following day is when I had my appointment for my MRI. I'm like feeling good. I just, you know, came off a competition high, post-knee surgery, and I was in a good place. I got the MRI. MRIs are always scary for me because it's like you never know what they're gonna find. Went home. I was chilling with my dog. Not even an hour goes by, and then I get a call from my neurologist. Like, oh shit, like they only call people that quickly for results if they find something. So I was like, whew, took a deep breath, answered the call, and my neurologist was like, hey Angelica, you know, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but they found something on your MRI. It's like, okay. And then from here, it just gets really bad. So he's like, I'm so sorry. They found a mass, a really large mass in your brain. And he's like, we're not sure what type of mass this is, but we need to get this taken care of. And I was like, oh my God, like, oof. The tears came down, and I just got this overwhelming feeling of fear and not sensing my own mortality, but just realizing that shit is hitting the fan. Shit's getting real. So he's like, I recommend you go to your county hospital, have them do an MRI on you and see what we can do. He's like, we need to get this taken out immediately. He's like, this mass is huge. It's really big. I was like, okay, thank you, doctor. And I hang up and I just start bawling my eyes out. And I ended up going to county. I went straight to the ER and let them know what my neurologist said. They're like, okay, we're gonna order you an MRI. We're gonna, you know, have you here for a little bit. So did the MRI over there, and this was when I got to see the mass for the first time. The tech showed me, and all I see is just my brain, of course, and then this big ass mass. Like, just, it was in like left upper side of my head, and you could see the mass, and it was fucking huge. It was like literally a fourth of my brain is what it looked like to me. And so I was like, wow, that shit is big. And they're like, yeah. They also gave me some type of drug to do the MRI because I was really afraid. Like, I don't like small spaces. So I was drugged up on something that made me feel like I had a couple glasses of wine. So I was feeling good, but also I was scared as shit. And they're like, this thing is really large. Like, it's pushing on things in your brain, and it's probably what's causing all these symptoms for you, and it needs to come out like immediately. I was like, oh shit, okay. They're like, we're gonna refer you out to UCSF. You know, you're gonna stay there overnight, and we'll have one of their specialists kind of explain to you next steps. So I ended up getting ambulanced over to UCSF. I ended up meeting someone from my medical team, and they're just kind of explaining to me like what's happening. You know, the doctor will be here in the morning and he'll talk to you, so we're gonna admit you overnight. And I was like, oh my God. I didn't know if I was gonna get surgery the next day. I didn't know what was gonna happen to me, but I was drugged up, and also this was completely out of my control. I ended up getting woken up like 6 in the morning or so, and this was me meeting my neurosurgeon for the first time, and he is a literal lifesaver, so I'm very grateful. But he introduced himself, and he's like, I understand you're here, you know, because they found something. You've been having some weird symptoms. Can you describe your symptoms? So I gave him the rundown of what's been going on, and he's like, okay, well, you know, from the looks of things, this looks like what is referred to as an ependymoma. And I was like, what is that? Like, do I have cancer? Like, just, you know, in layman's terms, what the fuck is going on with me? An ependymoma is just a type of brain tumor. Typically, it is non-cancerous, it is benign. It's like, you know, so we need to take it out. With your consent, I'm gonna get you on my schedule to remove the tumor from your brain. You know, he kind of explained to me what would happen and how it would work. It happened is, of course, they cut open my skull. They'd make a tiny, tiny hole in my brain, and they go through that hole into where the mass is located. And basically what they do is they chop it up into like a million little pieces, and then they remove the pieces one by one. He's like, you know, surgery would take about 6 to 8 hours. Recovery time for you, I know you're an athlete, 6 to 8 weeks. And then he's like, you can resume your life how it is. Like, you can go back to normal after that. So I was like, this sounds almost too good to be true. And it low-key was, but we'll get into that. My doctor was like young. He was very confident. that everything will be taken care of. He's like, I do these all the time. You're in really good hands. And if you would like to move forward with the surgery, I'll have the team contact you and get everything scheduled. I had 2 weeks before my scheduled surgery, and it was 2 weeks of processing what was happening to me. For my surgery, I had to go in for an MRI, and they had to fit me for what's called brain mapping. And so they had to shave little bald spots in my head, and they would put in, it's like where these little electrode thingies go, and it maps your brain, so it helps the neurosurgeon navigate as they're doing the surgery what path they're going to take to get to the tumor. Some characteristics of my tumor, they said it was about the size of my fist, so this big right here. They said it's probably been growing for a long time because it is so big. It's very vascular, which made it a little more risky, meaning that there were a lot of veins coursing through this tumor. They had to be really careful about how they cut it and remove the pieces. Leading up to, the night before and preparing for the surgery, I did a lot of inner work, a lot of meditation, a lot of manifesting, a lot of visualizations for how surgery would go. I decided to stop living in fear and start living in what is, just knowing my body, knowing everything I had gone through the past 6 months. Brain surgery is just going to be another thing to add to that list. I am strong enough to overcome this, and I'm going to be back to normal and everything's going to be fine. So I went in with that mindset, and I had been really focusing spiritually on getting through this. This was just another roadblock that I would pass or work my way around and continue moving on with life. I actually bought a little notebook, and I had been writing down manifestations, writing down words of affirmation, writing down how I was feeling in the days leading up to the surgery, and I was just ending it with positivity. Starting with positivity, ending it with positivity, maybe somewhere in the middle, writing down my fears, but knowing that somehow, some way I am divinely protected and I would get through it. And I did. The day of the surgery, I had to arrive around 6. Well, I got dressed first in the scrubs or whatever, the gown. They put the IV in me, and then my neurosurgeon came in. He explained to me the breakdown of the surgery. He did go over the risks, which again was language, making sure it doesn't affect my speech, the blind spots in my vision. And nobody really predicted what was going to happen next, but I was in good spirits. I remember getting into the operating room. When I went in for knee surgery, they just put something in my IV and I went to sleep this time around. They're asking me, oh, how are you doing today? How's your morning? How are you feeling? And I'm just having a normal conversation. And then some guy is okay, I'm gonna put this mask on you, but I just want you to still keep breathing. And I was oh, okay. So I thought it was just an oxygen mask, and it was the gas to make me go to sleep, and I didn't realize it. So I'm just chatting away or whatever. Next thing I know, I'm out like a light. I wake up, and it was very spotty at this point. I woke up a couple of times. So I woke up once, and I remember hearing voices. I remember my mom being there, and I remember still having the tubing stuff down my throat. Go back to sleep. The next time I wake back up, I remember seeing nurses, my mom, and I just remember being very groggy and having a lot of patches in my head. Drains. I had drains in my head. To drain out the fluid from, after having surgery. I thought it was the next day after the surgery. It ended up being 3 to 4 days after the surgery. So here's what happened. When I was on the operating table right before they decided to cut open the skull, I ended up having a seizure that lasted 10 seconds. Once the seizure ended, then they proceeded to cut the skull. Started going into the brain. About halfway through the procedure, I decided to have another seizure, and this one lasted for about 2 minutes, I think, from what the note said. They decided to just close me up and call it a day with the surgery. The following day, there was a lot of brain swelling, and then I ended up having a blood clot. So again, they had to take me back into a surgery, open my skull from the front to remove the blood clot, and then they kept me in a medically induced state until like that third or fourth day when I remember waking up. My doctor came in and he explained to me there were some complications, and I was like, oh my god, like I didn't know if I was gonna be paralyzed. I didn't know. Obviously my vision was fine, but I didn't know what to expect. So he let me know I had 2 seizures during the procedure. They had to keep me under for a little bit longer to heal the brain, and I would be staying in the ICU until my symptoms got better. He did notify me that I had 2 drains in my head to help drain out fluid, to help with the healing process. And from there, he's like, so you just rest up, we'll check in on you throughout the day. I was still under a lot of medication at this time, so the first week pretty much flew by. Like, don't really remember much. I remember getting checked on a lot, had a lot of help, a lot of assistance, but I was eating regularly. Vitals looked good. Everything was kind of returning back to normal. The second week was hell week. This was the week where I started to get a lot of migraines from the surgery. Every day I would wake up, I would eat breakfast. Right when I started eating breakfast, I would just get these killer fucking migraines, like unlike anything I had felt before. They felt worse than the migraine I had when I had to go to the ER. It was bad. Like, it felt like I just wanted to die. So that whole week they ended up prescribing me Oxy, and that basically knocked me out for the week. So if I wasn't up eating, I was laying down with a massive migraine, or I was asleep. So that was my second week. The second week was the hardest week. I was very moody. I didn't want to get up and like walk around how I was supposed to. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do my little exercises. I was pissed and I was in a lot of pain. The third week was a good week for me. I started to become more aware of things, and I started to do some light physical therapy in the hospital. So they had me walking around, and I'll post a video clip of what that looked like. Still had the drains in my head, and it got to a point where either I was gonna have to get a, I forgot what it's called, a stent. They thought I might have had to have put a stent in my head if, didn't finish draining, but luckily I didn't, but still had the drains in. The third week was also when they were able to take out the staples, and I remember crying like a little bitch because they hurt. The wound was closed up and things were heading in the right direction, but I was starting to become like more alive, more like myself. Whereas in the previous 2 weeks, it was just kind of hazy. It was like a dreamlike state almost. They moved me out of the ICU into a regular recovery room. I shared it with the older lady who also was there for a brain tumor, and she had to get hers removed too. She was really sweet, but I was irritated because I need my space. Like, don't give me no roommates. That week, I noticed a little bit of strength coming back. I still had to like walk with the walker and like with assistance, but spirit was a little more alive. And that week I found out that I was not going home. I was actually going to stay in an acute rehab facility where they would help me with coordination, learning how to walk again, working on speech. And actually one thing that they didn't mention that I found out later was that my memory was really impaired from this surgery. That night I was admitted. I had to walk with a walker. Like, I could not do anything without assistance. I couldn't even use the bathroom on my own. It was really irritating because I'm very self-sufficient, very independent, and it was really hard having to constantly ask someone for help or wait for a nurse to come in after I buzzed her, and like there was no privacy in the bathroom. Like, it was a lot going on, and I was very uncomfortable. You get your own room. It's a big ass room. You can have visitors as you please. They could bring you food from the outside. You get 3 meals a day. The hours are weird. Like, they would feed you at like 7, 11, and 4. So sometimes I'd be hungry at the end of the day. But it was throughout that day, you had 3 hours of intensive therapy. So for me, it was physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. It was the best facility, but it was hard and it was very intensive, and it required a lot from me on a physical and mental level, but it was the push that I needed to start becoming my old self again. And then after that, I was finally discharged to go home. So by this point, it had been about 5 weeks since I was home. I had to take things really easily. I couldn't lift more than 5 to 10 pounds. They encouraged walking every day as often as I needed to. No overexerting myself, no high intensity training, a lot of sleep. And that's what I did. After maybe 2 months, I was doing like low impact workouts off of YouTube. they referred me to continue doing therapy, but like outpatient therapy. So I ended up getting to work with my old physical therapist from when I had knee surgery, and I got to meet with a speech therapist and then an occupational therapist. I started to learn how to do dishes again, how to like clean, fold. It was basically relearning everyday functioning. I started to feel again more like myself. One thing that was missing throughout my recovery was a lack of emotion. Once I woke up from surgery, the only emotion I could feel was humor, if that's an emotion, or the only characteristic was humor. I would like bust out a joke here and there. I would laugh at stuff that was funny. I had a really hard time understanding the concept of love. Like my family would visit me and I would feel love, and like people from the gym would reach out or they sent me gifts and I would feel that love, feel that appreciation, but like loving other people was not there. Like I could not process that at the time. Yeah, it was kind of weird. I was not as human as I would have liked to have been, but I think I was transitioning back into coaching at the gym. So that was good. That was really good for me because I got to interact with people again. Again, a lot of emotions began to arise, emotions that were non-existent after surgery. And then my spirituality, I felt like really carried me through this whole process. I ended up recently having a follow-up appointment back in March. And then I got to meet with an oncologist. And the reason for that was because initially I was diagnosed with the ependymoma. After doing and completing the surgery, it ended up being a grade 1 meningioma. When I met with the oncologist, he told me that this was an extremely rare type of meningioma called a chorus plexus, but it is an extremely rare tumor, and they think I've had this since like birth. I have this gene because they did like some DNA testing. They said only 1 to 2% of people with tumors have this specific gene that can trigger this type of tumor, chorus plexus, and I just so happen I'm lucky enough to have it. So yeah, I think I've pretty much had this my whole life, and usually with slow growing tumors like this, it takes years before people even have that first symptom. I've had, I guess, not only a spiritual awakening, but I just think a life awakening. I feel like this has definitely been my second chance at life, and the way I was living before was fine, but again, I was in a very fear-based mind state, didn't take a lot of risks. I was happy being comfortable with the way things were, but that's not challenging, and that's not growth, that's not evolving, it's not aligning you with what you should be doing and where you should be at in your life. At some point, you have to continue that path of enlightenment, that path of growth, that path of personal self-development. And coming out of surgery and coming like full circle to my recovery and coming back into this personality, back into this body, I take more risks. I am more open to trying new things. After coming so close to death, like they were not sure if I was gonna come out of that surgery. Coming so close to that realization made me realize that, like, shit, girl, this is it. Like, you might get reincarnated, but you might not. Why not take advantage of what God and the universe have put you on here to do? And it's been really beautiful connecting with other people who have gone through similar struggles that I have, especially with the brain tumor situation or brain surgery situation. I've been rewarded in a lot of ways by the universe and by God, and I am not wasting my time anymore with anything that does not serve me or serve that purpose. So I have about 50% or less left of this tumor. So I have decided, after consulting with specialists, of doing a second brain surgery, believe it or not, to remove the rest of this tumor. And from there, that is with the hopes that the shit will never grow back in this lifetime or ever. Throughout this whole process, all of my doctors agreed that because I am an athlete and I was doing CrossFit and weightlifting, those are very important factors that helped me recover as fast as I did. Given the complications that I had, for a lot of people, it takes them a lot longer to recover. A lot of people are in the hospital and in rehab way longer than I was. And I basically defied all those standards and expectations that they had for me initially. A lot of my doctors accredit that to my active lifestyle. That is what's been up with me. That is my brain surgery story, and I really am truly grateful for my medical team throughout all of this, and my family and my friends and the gym members and my boss, my mentor. Like, so grateful for all of them, because they give me the motivation to keep going on those days where I did not want to get up and do shit. They were reminders for me to keep pushing, keep moving forward, keep progressing. My neurosurgeon was so fucking dope, made me feel so comfortable going through this life-changing experience. All the nurses along the way, the staff at the rehab facility, and doing all this through COVID. I'm blessed, and this whole experience showed me how truly blessed I am, and it showed me how strong my support system is and how amazing the people I have in my life are. And I am praying, and I have faith, and I have a feeling that this next surgery is my last surgery, and I will be completely healed after that, and then I'll really be completely 100% liberated. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to send me a message, leave a comment. Thank you, everybody, just for all the support and for showing me my own strength.